Thank you so much for watching and listening. Totally stoked to have you here. We're doing our series, Journeys with Jesus, and I want you to subscribe because it's a great series. Share it with your friends because it'll encourage them and maybe provoke some thoughts and some curiosity as well. Of course, we have an amazing joke, and that's kind of loose in the loose term sense of the word. Here's your joke. Where does bad light go? Where does bad light go? It goes to prism. You're like that. Yes, it is awful. I agree. It's so bad you want to just groan. So let's get on with some amazing content. Continue our series on Journeys with Jesus. So we looked at walking with Jesus, and then we looked at sailing, swimming with Jesus, or drowning, depending on your choice of verbs. Today we're going to look at riding with Jesus. You're like, what do you mean by riding? Well, I believe that Jesus, we know this. We know that he rode into Jerusalem. We know it today as Palm Sunday, his triumphal entry. And you can read about that in Luke chapter 19, verses 28 to 40. And he rides on a donkey. And it's interesting, this whole donkey idea. And he tells his disciples and gives them very clear directions on how to get the donkey and who the donkey is. And then they put their coats, on over it so he can ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. And then they put down palm branches and their coats on the road. The whole city busts out in praise and worship, like, oh my God, Jesus is here. And he tells his disciples when they're going to find the donkey, if the owner asks you, why are you taking the donkey? Just tell the owner the Lord has need of the donkey. I always like to say Jesus needs a donkey. And we can all be sometimes that donkey and maybe carry Jesus. Something for you to think about. But riding with Jesus, letting Jesus ride in our lives as well. And I want to point out to you as well, it's possible that there was some riding that Jesus did, maybe going to Bethlehem when Mary was pregnant with him, and maybe going down to Egypt, because that's kind of a long commute from Bethlehem down to Egypt. When he ran away, they ran away from the murderous threats of Herod. Anyways, so Jesus rode. Not often. We don't see him riding a whole lot. We see him walking mostly, sailing second most, and riding third most in terms of journeys with Jesus, transportation, traveling, and these are three methods of his traveling, of his journey, transportation. But I think it's interesting to think about that whole idea of riding on a donkey, that Jesus rode on a donkey. And, I think it's important for us to consider that we can carry Jesus. We can carry Jesus into our daily living. And sometimes we're not always the greatest person. Sometimes we can be cranky and prickly and combative, hostile. We're hard to deal with. But appreciate that we can still carry Jesus. We can still say, okay, I know I'm struggling. I know I'm having a hard time. I know that I might be less than perfect. I might be prickly, but Jesus, I want to carry you. I want to bring your presence, and I want to exalt you. I want people, and even though, help people to see past my prickly and see your presence, to see and acknowledge that you're the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and worthy of praise and worthy of glory, and the one who loves us, the lover of our souls more than anybody else, that we can carry Jesus. And so I think when we think about that traveling with Jesus, journeys with Jesus, it can be a lot of different ways. It can just be the customary walking. It can be sailing, kind of going through various tumultuous times, storms, or quiet. But we can also sometimes be prickly and be difficult, but we can still carry Jesus, even in difficult, dark, challenging situations and scenarios. And interesting to think about. As Jesus came riding on the donkey into Jerusalem, there were participants. The participants in this whole scenario were the disciples, his own disciples. There was the crowd that was around in Jerusalem. There were religious leaders, and there was the donkey. And in all those participants, Jesus is riding into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, religious leaders who say to him, hey, you need to shut these people up. They shouldn't be exalting you. And Jesus tells them, well, if I shut them up, even the rocks will cry out in praise. The disciples, and then the crowds. And in the crowds, they turn fickle, right? I mean, they're like, woo, praise Jesus. And then 4 or 5 days later, they're like, crucify him. So they're very fickle. You have the disciples honoring, exalting Jesus, walking with him for, 2, 3 years. And on the night that he's betrayed, they all abandon him. The religious leaders, they're out to kill him no matter what. And the donkey, we don't know what happens to the donkey, but we do know, in all those 3 groups of people, they all at some point walk away or betray Jesus. And at the end of all of this, I want us to really consider in our own hearts and our own lives that we stay faithful, devoted, in love with Jesus, no matter what. No matter what we see, what we go through, who's around us, experiences, that we're not just fickle and we're not afraid and we're not, punitive and condemning and judgmental. Those are religious leaders. Let's stay in love with Jesus, and let's stay loyal and faithful to Jesus no matter what's happening in our lives. So thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Hit the notification bell right there. Keep you posted when we put up new content. And here's a question for you to answer right here in the comments now. Whom do you most want to be like in the triumphal entry story? So among all those participants, the donkey, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the crowd, among all those 4, who do you want to most be like? And just leave that in the comments. It's kind of some thought-provoking scenario, though. All right, thanks so much for watching. Keep up next week because we're going to finish up our series on Journeys with Jesus.